Get your things, and get out of my sight now." The words hit the cabin like a dropped tray of glass. Marcus Webb did not flinch. He sat in seat 2A with his hands flat on his knees, his gray wool coat folded neatly across his lap, his breathing even, almost bored. But the air around him had changed the way air changes right before a storm breaks. Thick, metallic, waiting. Vanessa Cole stood over him in the aisle. Her Meridian Airways scarf knotted so tight, it looked like it might cut off her air supply too. Her voice had been pitched, just loud enough to carry. The way people speak when they want an audience more than they want an answer. Behind her, Gerald Prescott straightened his cufflinks with the satisfaction of a man watching a problem solve itself. His wife, Diane, stood a half step back, one hand resting on the headrest of seat 2B, as if she already owned it, her smile thin as a paper cut. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "I have a confirmed ticket for this seat." "I've heard that one before," Vanessa said. "People print all kinds of things at home." A few rows back, a man lowered his phone from his ear. An older woman by the window took off her reading glasses. Somewhere near the galley, a cartwheel clicked and went still. The cabin held its breath, the way rooms do right before someone says something they can't take back. Before we get to what happened next, let's go back 3 hours, to a gate at Denver International Airport where none of this had started yet, and where a very different kind of morning was quietly building toward Gate C-14. The terminal smelled like burnt coffee and jet fuel, the particular perfume of 6 a.m. travel. Fluorescent light bounced off polished floors. A janitor pushed a cart past a bank of monitors blinking red with delays. Somewhere a baby was crying, and nobody had the energy left to mind. Marcus Webb stood near the priority boarding line with a battered leather satchel slung over one shoulder. The kind of bag that had clearly been resoled twice rather than replaced. His overcoat was plain charcoal wool, no logo, no flash. His shoes had been polished that morning by his own hand, out of habit, not vanity. On his left wrist sat a scratched silver watch with a hairline crack across the crystal. A Christmas gift from his mother the year he graduated from Morehouse, back when neither of them owned much of anything. "Never let a room decide your worth before you've opened your mouth," she used to say, tapping that same watch on his wrist when he was 22 and terrified. He was 46 now, and he still heard her voice every time someone's eyes moved over him a little too slowly. He'd learned the geography of that look years ago. Boutique hotels where the doorman held the door for the man behind him instead. Boardrooms where investors addressed his own analyst before addressing him. Department stores where a security guard's radio crackled 2 aisles over the moment he picked up a watch to admire it. He knew the choreography by heart. He simply refused to perform his part in it anymore. At 46, Marcus was the founder and chief executive of Aegis Dynamics, a company that built fairness auditing software used by banks, hospitals, and, increasingly, airlines to catch bias hiding inside algorithms that decided who got approved, who got flagged, who got believed. This morning he was flying to Seattle to deliver the closing keynote at the National Forum on Corporate Accountability. The talk was called "The Cost of Being Overlooked." He'd been rewriting the opening line in his head for 2 weeks and still hadn't landed it. His phone buzzed. Text from his assistant, Olivia Grant. "Meridian executive team confirmed for tomorrow's 9 a.m. Board wants your read before final sign-off." Marcus typed back a single word, "Understood," and slid the phone into his coat pocket just as the gate agent lifted her microphone. "Now, boarding first class and Meridian Elite members for Flight 214 to Seattle." The crowd stirred the way crowds do at that announcement, shoulders squaring, bags gripped a little tighter. Gerald and Diane Prescott moved into the priority lane as though it had been built specifically to receive them. Gerald was 59, silver-haired, built like a man who golfed for the connections rather than the game, wearing a navy blazer that announced money before he said a word. Diane, 54, wore cream cashmere and pearl studs, and the permanently composed expression of someone who had never once had to wait for anything in her adult life. Finally, Diane murmured, loud enough that the gate agent's smile flickered. Gerald's eyes drifted toward Marcus, standing one place ahead of them in line. His gaze moved over Marcus's coat, his satchel, his shoes, and stopped, just for a beat, on his face. It was a fast look, barely a second, but Marcus had spent his whole life cataloging that particular second. He said nothing. He simply stepped forward, scanned his phone, and the gate reader chimed green. "Thank you, Mr. Webb. Seat 2A. Enjoy your flight." Behind him, Diane leaned toward her husband. "Did she say 2A? Gerald's jaw tightened. "That's our row." Inside the cabin, the first-class seats gleamed under crisp white light, cream leather, and brushed steel, oval windows fogged with the gray of a Colorado morning. Marcus settled into 2A by the window, tucked his satchel beneath the seat in front of him, and exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. A few hours of quiet. A few hours to rehearse his opening line. A few hours where nobody asked him to prove he belonged somewhere he had already paid to be. Then a shadow fell across his row, and the quiet ended before it had really begun. "Excuse me," Gerald said, standing over him now, voice pitched for an audience that hadn't gathered yet. "You're in our seat." Marcus looked up slowly. The words landed the way a stone lands on still water, small, but the ripples went everywhere. "Our seat," he repeated, not as a challenge, just as a fact laid gently on the table between them, waiting to see who would pretend not to notice it. "Yes," Gerald said. "My wife and I fly this route monthly, 2A and 2B, every time." Marcus glanced at the empty seat beside him, then at the boarding pass in Gerald's hand. "Your seat is 2C, he said. "Mine is 2A. He held up his own pass between two fingers. Gerald did not look at it. That refusal told Marcus everything he needed to know. The truth had never been the problem. The problem was that accepting the truth would have required Gerald to accept the word no, and men like Gerald had built entire lives around never hearing it. Diane leaned in, her voice syrup-sweet and razor-edged underneath. "There must be some mix-up. These booking systems get confused all the time." She said it, the way people say things they don't believe, testing whether the room will let them get away with it. A man across the aisle lowered his phone an inch. A woman 2 rows back pretended to search her purse while watching from the corner of her eye. The cartwheel near the galley clicked into its slot, and the cabin went quiet in that particular way. Not restful, just waiting. Gerald raised one finger, and within seconds, Vanessa Cole appeared from the forward galley, moving with the practiced speed of someone who had learned exactly whose summons to answer first. Her smile, when she reached Gerald, was warm as sunlight. When she turned to Marcus, it went cold as the cabin air. "Mr. Prescott, is everything all right?" "There's been a mistake," Gerald said. "This gentleman is in our seat." Vanessa's eyes moved over Marcus. Coat, shoes, watch, face, in the space of a heartbeat, and something in her expression settled before she'd even asked a single question. "Sir," she said, "may I see your boarding pass?" He handed it to her. She studied it far longer than it required, tapped her tablet, frowned, tapped again, drawing the silence out until it had weight. "It does say 2A, she admitted, as if the ticket itself had disappointed her. "Then fix it," Gerald snapped. Vanessa's cheeks colored, but she nodded and leaned toward Marcus, dropping her voice to a register clearly designed to sound discreet while remaining perfectly audible to the entire cabin. "Sir, the Prescotts are Meridian elite members. They've held this same seating arrangement for years. I'm sure you understand the importance of accommodating our most loyal travelers." Something cold settled behind Marcus's ribs, not surprise, recognition. "I'm a paying customer as well," he said evenly. "Of course," Vanessa said, in a tone that made it clear she didn't believe that mattered nearly as much. Diane crossed her arms. "There are other seats. This really doesn't need to become difficult." It became difficult, Marcus said, the moment you asked me to give up the one I paid for. Gerald let out a short, ugly laugh. Come on, it's one seat. Then sit in yours, Marcus said. The cabin tightened another degree. A young man in row 4, mid-20s, lifted his phone and began recording without quite deciding to. Vanessa noticed the motion and her professional warmth evaporated entirely. Sir, I'll need you to keep a respectful tone. My tone hasn't changed, Marcus said, and that was true, which made the accusation feel even uglier hanging in the recycled air. Gerald leaned into the aisle, crowding the space between them.
Look, buddy, I don't know what game you're playing, but we've flown this airline for 2 decades.
Marcus met his eyes without blinking. And I've lived in this country for 46 years. The sentence didn't rise in volume. It simply landed, heavier than anything shouted could have. Diane inhaled sharply. Vanessa's expression hardened into something closer to fear than authority. Gerald blinked, caught off guard by the size of what had just entered the conversation, because this had never really been about a window seat, and everyone in that cabin now quietly understood it. Vanessa straightened her spine, reaching for the only tool she still trusted. Sir, if you refuse crew instruction, this could become a security matter. There it was. The oldest shortcut in the book, the fastest way to convert discomfort into authority. Marcus felt the shift, the way you feel a change in cabin pressure. So now a valid ticket becomes a security issue, he said quietly. Your behavior determines that, Vanessa said. My behavior, Marcus repeated, hands still resting flat on the armrests, voice still level, has not moved an inch since I sat down. An older woman by the window, mid-70s, silver hair pinned back, reading glasses now folded in her lap, finally spoke, her voice soft but landing like a dropped stone. He hasn't done anything. Vanessa turned toward her. Ma'am, please let us handle this. I'm watching you handle it, the woman said, and did not look away. Remember that watch on his wrist. It's about to matter more than anyone in that cabin could imagine. Gerald threw his hands up. This is absurd. Nobody's discriminating against anyone. We just want our usual seats. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then why did your usual seat become my problem? Gerald opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Simple questions are the most dangerous kind because the silence that follows them says everything the person refuses to. Diane's voice sharpened. The syrup gone now. You're making everyone uncomfortable. A man near the aisle cleared his throat and studied his shoes. A woman in row 3 suddenly found something fascinating in her seat back pocket. Nobody wanted to say Diane was wrong, because in the worst possible way, she was right. Everyone was uncomfortable. Not because Marcus was loud, he wasn't. Not because he was threatening, he wasn't. They were uncomfortable because he refused to disappear quietly, the way the script demanded he should. Vanessa turned on her heel. I'm getting the cabin supervisor. Please do, Marcus said. She marched off, heels striking the carpet in short, furious steps. Diane set her handbag down deliberately on seat 2B, as though staking a flag into contested ground. Marcus glanced at it, unmoved. Ma'am, that seat isn't yours either. It's just a bag, Diane said. Then move it. The words were quiet, clean, and absolutely final. Diane stared at him, stunned that he had addressed her without a trace of apology in his voice. Gerald snatched the bag back himself with a sharp, embarrassed jerk. Happy now? No, Marcus said. But accurate. Near the forward galley, Vanessa was already speaking in urgent, clipped phrases to a man in a dark Meridian vest. Derek Holt, cabin supervisor, 48 years old, 22 years in the air, arms crossed before he'd even reached row 2. Passenger refusing crew instruction, Vanessa told him. Elite members displaced. Possible disruption. Derek's face hardened with each phrase, exactly the way she needed it to. He didn't ask why the boarding pass said 2A. He didn't ask whether the Prescotts had confirmed seats of their own. He simply absorbed the words that made his job simpler. Refusing, disruption. elite, and walked down the aisle like a verdict already written. "Mr. Webb," Derek said, stopping beside Vanessa. "I understand we've got an issue." "There's no issue with my ticket," Marcus said. "That's not what I asked." The temperature of the conversation dropped several degrees. This was no longer customer service, it was command. "My crew has asked for your cooperation resolving a seating concern, so we can get this flight moving." Gerald nodded behind him, encouraged. Diane crossed her arms again, watching Marcus the way a jury watches a man they've already convicted. Marcus felt every phone in the cabin pointed his way, felt the old, familiar trap tightening around him from every direction. Raise his voice, and they would call him aggressive. Stay silent, and they would call his silence guilt. Stand up, and they would call it threatening. Stay seated, and they would call it noncompliance. So he chose the one weapon they had never learned to defend against: precision. "Your crew is asking me to surrender a confirmed first-class seat," Marcus said. "Not for safety, not for a mechanical issue, not for a medical emergency, for another passenger's personal preference. Is that correct?" Derek blinked. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Gerald looked away. Marcus reached into his coat and produced a slim black card case, setting it on the armrest without opening it. "Before you answer that," he said, "choose your next words carefully." Derek stared at the case for a long beat, and for the first time all morning he felt something shift beneath his own confidence, a flicker of doubt about who exactly the problem in row 2 actually was. "Mr. Webb," Derek said, "gentler now. Nobody's questioning your right to fly. You're questioning my right to sit," Marcus said. A hush rolled backward through the cabin, row by row. The young man recording in row 4 kept his thumb steady on the screen, sensing, without quite knowing why, that he was capturing something far larger than an argument about a window view. Gerald's patience snapped first. "For God's sake, just move the man. I've got a connecting flight in Seattle, and I am not missing it over somebody's principles." Marcus turned to him fully for the first time. "I'm not making a point," he said. "I'm refusing to be erased." The words didn't rise. They deepened, and the difference mattered. Diane's nostrils flared. "This is exactly the problem with people today. Everything has to be some grand statement. It's a seat." Marcus looked at her, and for a moment something almost like sadness crossed his face. "To you," he said. That quiet answer cut harder than any raised voice could have, because it exposed the entire gap between them in 3 words. Derek leaned closer, his voice dropping to something meant to sound reasonable. "Sir, I need to be very clear. If you refuse a crew member's instruction, this can become a security matter." Vanessa's shoulders eased at the word security, the oldest shortcut, the fastest route from discomfort to authority. Marcus noticed. "So a confirmed seat is now a security matter," he said. "Your behavior determines that," Derek said. Marcus set his hands flat on the armrests, calm and unmoved. "I am cooperating with the terms of my ticket," he said. "I am seated in 2A, and if the crew determines a seating change is necessary, I'll need that documented. Your name, your employee number, and the specific reason for moving me." Derek froze. For the first time, he looked past Marcus's face and saw something he should have seen from the very beginning. Not fear. Documentation. The cabin went silent again, the particular silence that settles right before something breaks open for good. Then, near the aircraft door, the gate agent's voice cut through the quiet, low and urgent into her headset. "Yes, the passenger is Marcus Webb. Yes, Aegis Dynamics. Confirming that now." The color drained slowly from Derek's face. Vanessa heard it too, and understood in that instant that whatever story she thought she'd been telling had just left the cabin entirely. It was moving now through radios, through headsets, through offices where people with titles were about to ask one very uncomfortable question. What exactly did our crew just do? Marcus lifted his phone and dialed Olivia Grant. She picked up on the first ring. "Marcus." Her voice was calm, but taut. the way it always got when she already sensed something had gone wrong before he'd said a word. "I need you to notify the board chair," Marcus said. "Meridian Airways has created an incident on Flight 214, first class, seat 2A. Multiple passengers recording." "What category?" Olivia asked, without a trace of doubt in her voice. Marcus looked at Vanessa, at Derek, at Gerald and Diane sitting rigid across the aisle in seats that weren't even the ones they'd fought for. "Discriminatory service escalation," he said. "Potential contract review. 4 words, clean, devastating." Derek closed his eyes for half a second. Vanessa's breath went shallow, because she understood, better than most, exactly what a failed partnership could cost. Executives their bonuses, departments their budgets, and frontline staff careers they'd spent decades building. "Do you want legal looped in?" Olivia asked. "Yes," Marcus said, "but no public statement yet. I want facts first." That single sentence changed the temperature of the cabin more than any threat could have. He wasn't chasing revenge. He was building a record. At the front of the aircraft, Captain Rebecca Sinclair stepped out of the cockpit. 51 years old, silver hair cropped close, the composed economy of movement that comes from decades of making decisions under pressure. Her eyes swept the cabin once. Derek's posture, Vanessa's face, Gerald in the aisle, Diane clutching her handbag, Marcus seated and calm, with a black card case still resting on his armrest, and 3 separate phones still recording. She understood immediately this was not an ordinary seating dispute.
"Mr. Holt,"
she said, "step forward." Derek approached her like a man walking into a verdict he already suspected. He gestured once toward Marcus, once toward the Prescotts, whispering the shorthand version. Rebecca listened without blinking. Behind her, the gate agent added the detail that made everything click into place. "Operations confirms he's the CEO of Aegis Dynamics." Rebecca's jaw tightened, something like genuine regret crossing her face. Not enough to undo what had happened, but enough to show she understood exactly how large the failure had become. She walked to row 2. "Mr. Webb," she said, "I'm Captain Sinclair, and I want to personally review what occurred here." "I've been asking for that since the beginning," Marcus said. "Understood," she said, and turned to the Prescotts.
"Mr. and Mrs.
Prescott, please take your assigned seats, 2C and 2D." Gerald stiffened. "Captain, with respect, we have flown loyally with this airline for 20 years. And today," Rebecca said, her voice cold enough to frost glass, "that changes nothing. 2 words, no room left in them." Gerald stared at her, waiting for the world to bend the way it always had. It didn't. He stepped aside, bitterly, Diane's heels striking the carpet, harder than necessary behind him. Rebecca turned to Vanessa next. "Ms. Cole." "Forward galley, now." "Captain, I was only trying to accommodate our loyal passengers," Vanessa said, voice trembling at the edges. "No," Rebecca said. "You tried to remove a confirmed passenger without cause." Her eyes were sharp enough to cut, and you did it in front of a full cabin. Marcus spoke before Vanessa could answer. "I refuse to be moved for prejudice wearing the mask of procedure." The sentence landed like a closing argument. Nobody spoke. Not Gerald, not Diane, not Vanessa, not Derek. Rebecca held Marcus's gaze a long moment, feeling the particular heat of institutional shame rising behind her professional composure, the kind that surfaces when an entire system reveals itself through the ordinary cruelty of ordinary people. She nodded once. "Then we document it properly. All of it." "Good," Marcus said, "because this was never only about me." Rebecca ordered the forward cabin door left open, and that single decision changed the sound of everything. Terminal noise drifted back in through the jet bridge. A cart rattled somewhere outside. The sealed little world of the aircraft cracked open, and the truth no longer had anywhere private left to hide. Vanessa stood in the galley, hands clasped tight in front of her uniform, breath shallow and uneven. Derek stood beside her, tablet lowered, no longer any kind of shield. Gerald and Diane sat rigid in 2C and 2D, furious in the particular way only publicly embarrassed people can be. Marcus remained in 2A, the seat looking in that moment more ordinary than it had ever looked. Cream leather, tray table, armrest. Nothing sacred. Nothing worth stripping a man's dignity over. And yet, here they all were. The gate agent, Monica Reyes, 39, tired-eyed, and sharper than most people gave her credit for, stood near the door with her headset pressed close. She'd watched Vanessa barely glance at Marcus's boarding pass. She'd watched Gerald behave as though ownership could be inherited through habit alone. Now she watched the airline begin, quietly and visibly, to panic. Operations wants written statements from everyone involved, Monica said. Vanessa's head snapped up. Everyone? Everyone, Monica confirmed. Derek rubbed a hand across his mouth. Can we at least finish boarding first? No, Rebecca said from the galley. We don't push back until this is documented. Gerald muttered something under his breath. Diane whispered, This is humiliating to no one in particular. The elderly woman by the window turned to look at her. So, was what you did to him, she said quietly. Diane froze. The cabin shifted again. That small sentence gave silent permission to everyone else who had been sitting on their own conscience. Shoulders straightened along the rows. Phones stayed raised. A man in row 5 said, almost to himself, I saw the whole thing. A woman across the aisle added, he showed his ticket twice. They still tried to move him. Vanessa heard every word like glass breaking somewhere behind her. Monica stepped closer to Marcus. Mr. Webb, operations is requesting your account. I'll provide it, Marcus said, and opened the notes app on his phone, speaking with the calm precision of sworn testimony. Meridian Airways Flight 214, Denver to Seattle, Seat 2A. I boarded with a valid first-class ticket. Gerald and Diane Prescott approached and claimed the seat, stating they usually sit here. Vanessa Cole asked me to move despite confirming my seating was valid. Derek Holt escalated the matter and suggested my refusal could become a security issue. Each sentence landed clean and flat. Vanessa stared at the floor. Derek closed his eyes. You're leaving out the part where you were difficult. Gerald snapped from 2C. Marcus turned toward him. What exactly did I do that was difficult? Gerald opened his mouth. No answer came. The silence answered on his behalf. Rebecca stepped into the aisle. Mr. Prescott, you will not interrupt this statement. I'm an elite member, Gerald said, as if the words still carried weight. I'm aware, Rebecca said, and right now that helps you exactly none. Monica's headset crackled sharply enough for everyone nearby to hear it. Corporate is requesting confirmation Mr. Webb remains on board and has not been removed. Confirmed, Monica answered. Mr. Webb remains in seat 2A. A pause. Then another voice, older, male-controlled but strained beneath the surface. This is Andrew Pierce, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience. Put me on speaker. Monica looked to Rebecca, who nodded once, and the call was routed through the cabin phone near the galley. The executive's voice filled first class, Mr. Webb. On behalf of Meridian Airways, I want to apologize for what occurred. Marcus glanced toward the speaker. The whole cabin waited for him to accept it, to make everyone comfortable again. He didn't. Mr. Pierce, he said, what exactly are you apologizing for? The question froze the cabin colder than the silence before it. Andrew's breath was audible, even through the static. We apologize for the confusion around your seating, he tried. There was no confusion, Marcus said. We apologize for how the situation was handled. Marcus looked at Vanessa, then Derek, then the Prescotts across the aisle. Handled by whom? No one breathed. Andrew understood, in that instant, that this was not a man who could be soothed with a gift card and a form letter. Marcus had built a company on tracing bias through systems that hid behind neutral language. He recognized institutional apology when he heard it, and he recognized exactly how it worked to protect everyone except the person harmed. Andrew's voice dropped, stripped of its polish. We apologize that our personnel, attempted to remove you from your confirmed first-class seat to accommodate another passenger's preference, and that the situation escalated after your documentation had already confirmed your right to remain. A murmur moved through the cabin, quiet and stunned. Marcus didn't look away from the speaker. And why did that happen? That was the real question. Not what, why. Andrew was silent for a long moment. Rebecca watched Marcus with something close to hard respect now. She'd flown through engine warnings over the Rockies and medical emergencies mid-Atlantic, but this was a different kind of pressure entirely. No smoke, no alarms. Just one man quietly forcing an entire airline to name its own failure out loud. "That's what our investigation will determine," Andrew finally said. "No," Marcus said. "Your investigation will determine who participated. The why is already sitting in this cabin." He turned toward Diane. "You believed Mr. Prescott deserved my seat because he expected it. Ms. Cole acted on that belief. Mr. Holt escalated my refusal into a security threat. At every step, my ticket mattered less than their comfort with my presence." "That's not fair," Gerald said. "Fair," Marcus said, "would have been sitting in 2C from the start." The young man in row 4 lowered his phone slightly, mouth open. The elderly woman by the window wiped her eyes with the back of one hand. She didn't know Marcus, but she recognized the particular cost of staying calm, while people called your calm difficult. Andrew's voice returned through the speaker, weaker now. "Mr. Webb, Meridian will launch an immediate internal review." "That's not enough," Marcus said. "I want the passenger service logs preserved. I want the crew's tablet records preserved. I want time-stamped communications between Miss Cole, Mr. Holt, and operations. I want written statements from every employee involved. I want written confirmation that no passenger who spoke up or recorded today faces any retaliation. And I want this incident reviewed by someone entirely outside your customer operations chain." Monica gave the smallest nod, unseen by anyone but Marcus. Every item on that list closed a door where stories like this one usually quietly disappeared. Andrew exhaled. "We can agree to preserve records immediately. And the outside review?" A pause. "We'll escalate that request to the executive committee." "That sounds like a delay," Marcus said. "It's process." "No," Marcus said. "Process is what you call delay when the people harmed are expected to wait patiently for it." He picked up his phone again, thumb hovering over Olivia's name. Mr. Pierce, Aegis Dynamics board, was scheduled to finalize Meridian's partnership proposal tomorrow morning. Until an independent review is confirmed in writing, that vote is suspended. Silence rippled through the speaker on Andrew's end. "Mr. Webb, that partnership matters enormously to both our companies." Marcus looked out the window at the gray Denver sky. "Integrity matters more," he said quietly. The partnership was only ever paperwork. There it was. The reveal had become a reckoning. Not loud, not theatrical, simply absolute. "Give me 5 minutes," Andrew said. "You have 3, Marcus replied. Nobody in first class spoke while the seconds ticked past. Vanessa stood motionless, pale beneath the cabin lights. Derek stared at the floor, replaying every shortcut he'd taken to get here. Gerald stared into the aisle with the stiff fury of a man realizing status has a ceiling after all. Diane clutched her handbag in her lap like it might shield her from what was coming. 2 minutes and 50 seconds later, the speaker crackled back to life. "Mr. Webb, Meridian's executive committee has agreed to an independent review, effective immediately. Written confirmation is being sent to your office and legal counsel now. All crew logs, tablet, records, and communications related to Flight 214 will be preserved without exception." Marcus glanced at his phone. "Confirmation received. Board notified. Legal standing by." "Thank you," he said simply. And the plain courtesy made Vanessa lower her eyes even further. She had braced for anger. Anger she could have explained away, folded into a report, called disruptive. Marcus's restraint left her nowhere at all to hide. Rebecca stepped into the aisle again. "Mr. Pierce, I'm delaying departure until replacement cabin crew is assigned." She turned.
Miss
"Cole, you are relieved from cabin duty pending review." "I've served this airline for 16 years, Vanessa whispered. "Then you knew better," Rebecca said, and the words landed with quiet, total finality. Derek drew a slow breath.
And me?
"You'll provide a full statement before this aircraft moves an inch," Rebecca said. "Operations will decide the rest." A replacement flight attendant entered from the jet bridge. Renee Foster, mid-50s, steady and unhurried. No performance in her movements at all. She approached Marcus first. "Mr. Webb, I'm Renee. I'll be taking care of this cabin. Can I bring you water while we reset service?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Thank you." No suspicion, no extra scrutiny, no quiet test of his honesty. Just service, the ordinary thing that should have happened 3 hours and 1 humiliation ago. As Renee moved toward the galley, the elderly woman by the window reached across the aisle.
"Mr. Webb,"
she said softly. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." "You spoke when it mattered," Marcus said. "I should have spoken when it started," she said, eyes glassy, and that particular truth hung in the cabin longer than any apology from the speaker had. The aircraft finally pushed back 41 minutes late. Gerald and Diane sat rigid in 2C and 2D the entire flight, speaking to no one, least of all each other. Somewhere over eastern Colorado, Diane finally broke the silence between them. "We should have just taken different seats," she said quietly, not looking at her husband. Gerald's jaw worked. "This isn't on us. It's entirely on us," Diane said, and for the first time all morning, something like real shame crossed her face. She was thinking, though she would never say it aloud, about every gate agent she'd ever addressed like a servant, every reservation she'd assumed the world owed her, every time she'd mistaken habit for entitlement. Gerald said nothing at all for the rest of the flight, staring out the window at clouds that offered him no comfort whatsoever. 3 weeks later, Meridian Airways issued a public statement confirming that Vanessa Cole and Derek Holt had been terminated following an independent review that found, in the airline's own words, a documented pattern of discriminatory seating practices stretching back at least 14 months. 11 prior complaints filed and quietly closed without meaningful action, all involving Black or Latino passengers asked to surrender confirmed premium seats for loyalty accommodations. Meridian's chief operating officer resigned 2 weeks after that. The airline's partnership proposal with Aegis Dynamics was not canceled. It was rebuilt from scratch, this time with an independent bias audit clause written directly into the contract, along with a passenger rights hotline that bypassed frontline crew discretion entirely, routing every seating dispute straight to a documented, recorded review process. Gerald and Diane Prescott lost their Meridian elite status permanently after Monica Reyes's written statement, combined with 3 passengers' video footage, made clear they had escalated the confrontation from the very first minute. Their names appeared, unflattering and specific, in a regional business journal's coverage of the incident, a mention that followed Gerald into 2 subsequent business dealings, where partners quietly declined to renew contracts, citing, in careful language, concerns about public conduct and judgment. At a mediation session required as part of Meridian's settlement, Gerald sat across a conference table from Marcus for the first time since the flight and said, haltingly, that he hadn't understood, in the moment, what he was actually doing, that 20 years of always getting the seat had made him forget there was a person in it. It wasn't eloquent, it wasn't rehearsed, but it was, finally, true. 6 months after Flight 214, Marcus stood backstage at a different conference, in a different city, running one hand absently over the scratched crystal of his mother's watch before walking out to speak. His talk that year opened with a single line he'd finally found the words for, Dignity should never require a business card to prove it. He didn't mention Meridian by name. He didn't need to. Somewhere in the audience, a young analyst who had watched the viral footage 11 times sat gripping her own boarding pass a little tighter and understood, for the first time, exactly what it meant to hold your ground when the whole room expects you to fold. If this story reminded you that dignity should never depend on someone else's comfort with your presence, give it a moment before you scroll past. And if you've ever sat quietly in a room like that one, on either side of it, tell me which. I read every single one.